There's a lot of news happening around one of Detroit's biggest industries, autos. So on today's show, we'll talk about developments at Rivian and how Wall Street doesn't like Ford.
Then we'll touch on a couple of other stories. Another local brewery has been bought by an out-of-state owner, and there's a new Detroit director at the Knight Foundation. This is your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. It's a jam-packed show brought to you in part by people like you at patreon.com/dailydetroit and Lawrence Technological University.
So let's get to it, Sven. We've been following Rivian for a while, and, well, there's yet more news for this up-and-coming electric vehicle startup based right here out of Plymouth. Another big investment was announced today. To set the table, in case people don't know, remind us first who Rivian is for those who need a refresher.
Rivian is an electric vehicle company. They've been around for a while, about 10 years. They started in Florida, but for all intents and purposes, they had their coming out party late last year at the Los Angeles Auto Show. And that was basically the first that anybody had seen the cars that they have been working on all this time. And there are two of them. There's the R1T, which is a pickup truck, and there's an R1S SUV. And these are, for all intents and purposes, like performance vehicles. They boast sort of eye-popping specs, in terms of driving range. 400 miles on a driving range. That's better than just about any for their sort of highest variants. 0 to 60 times in 3 seconds. They've got like torque vectoring, which means you can direct power to individual wheels when you're taking them off road and everything. So they're really geared toward kind of high-end, well-heeled outdoors enthusiasts. And I mean, Jerry, you've seen these cars too. They're very eye-catching.
I just loved how they were laid out. I'm not a big pickup truck guy, but I love the gear tunnel in there, the thoughtfulness with the tailgate. They're just a variety of things where you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like they just thought of things that you're like, I've always wished I had this in a car, but I didn't know I needed it.
Right. And the interiors are like jam-packed with USB ports, perfect for today's connected passengers, right?
Yeah. So the latest, they're getting this $350 million equity investment from Cox Automotive. So who are they? Because I'll be honest, I am not familiar.
Cox Automotive is a big name in the auto industry. They're part of a big conglomerate based in Atlanta that also has like media divisions. They have a cable TV service, and then their automotive division, which is probably best known for brands including like Kelley Blue Book and Auto Trader. They also offer like a lot of software, like market intelligence and other things that auto dealerships rely on. So they're a big player.
That's fascinating to me that something that owns something like Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book would actually invest in a car company. Why are they doing this?
Cox says that advancements in battery technology and electric vehicle fleets are two of its like prime areas of focus nowadays. So, they're basically going after what is kind of like, fast becoming the buzzed about electric vehicle company in the world, like even more so than Tesla. They also have a major initiative dealing with environmental sustainability, and they say that this investment aligns with that.
All right, so what's in it for Rivian? They got to get something out of this deal.
Well, of course, they're getting $350 million in cash that they can use for product development and getting ready to launch manufacturing of the two vehicles, which are supposed to arrive late in 2020.
Because you still can't buy their vehicles, right?
That's correct. I mean, they're taking deposits now, but there are none of these driving out on the roads in the hands of consumers anyways. But interestingly, Rivian has said that it doesn't plan to go the route of traditional automakers, which is to say, you established franchise locations, and anybody you could have a Jer Stays Rivian dealership on Telegraph Road, right? They don't want to go that route. Instead, they want to do the direct to consumer sales model, sort of like Tesla.
How's that going to fly? Because aren't there a lot of legal problems with that, especially in states like Michigan?
Well, yeah. I mean, as current state law in Michigan holds, and in many other states, Rivian would not be able to launch a Rivian store here, like unless they let Jer Stays, open up a Rivian dealership. But let me also read you this quote in the statement from Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe. He said that they're excited to work with Cox Automotive, quote, in delivering a consistent consumer experience across our various touch points. Cox Automotive's global footprint, service, and logistics capabilities and retail technology platform make them a great partner for us. So this is really them kind of trying to build out, their retail side, which we haven't previously heard a whole lot about from Rivian.
And that's really interesting. In fact, some of the concepts that we saw as far as like what a Rivian store could be, like pie in the sky, nothing exact, but it was really, really interesting.
Like a Patagonia catalog, frankly.
So this is just one part of what's been a parade of investment, right?
Yeah, it's been a good year for Rivian, I guess you could say. In April, Ford announced it was investing $500 million. That's $500 million, phrased otherwise. Amazon early in the year announced that it was leading a $700 million round of financing in Rivian. Those two investments are a little bit different in nature from the Cox investment. Both Ford and Amazon are looking to gain access to Rivian, what Rivian calls its skateboard platform. This is the electric vehicle platform, which holds the drivetrain, the battery pack, the electric motors, and so forth. And it's flexible. So other companies, and it has always been Rivian's intention to license that skateboard technology to other companies for them to use. So for companies like Ford, they can use it to develop new electric vehicles, new electric pickup trucks or SUVs, whatever they want to do. And Amazon reportedly has been developing a prototype delivery vehicle. Now you can imagine a company with the global reach and scale of Amazon operating fleets of its own electric, battery-powered electric trucks. Think about the money they could save on fuel.
Well, not just fuel, but I remember seeing a report recently about the idea that there's going to be huge changes in the auto industry in general if you've got one unified platform. Because think about it. You don't need to bolt an engine together. There's a bunch of other parts that don't need to be made. And so there's a lot of, frankly, workers that wouldn't be needed.
Right. Well, Rivian, a company like Rivian with this skateboard technology represents potential huge savings for companies like Ford because they've got this flexible electric vehicle platform that Ford doesn't need to worry about building. It's a huge cost expenditure that suddenly is now taken care of. All Ford needs to do now is design, the body of a car around it, right? So with the Cox Automotive investment announced today, Rivian has cumulatively secured north of $1.5 billion from pretty well-established known companies in 2019 alone. I mentioned this has been a good year for them, right? And per the Wall Street Journal, today's investment by Cox values the company at $3.5 billion, all a year plus out from them actually building their first vehicles and releasing it to the market.
Speaking of Ford, Moody's Investors Service has downgraded the company's credit rating to junk status, a move that could make it harder and more expensive for Ford to borrow money in an industry downturn. That could become a problem if slowing global auto sales continue and if Ford needs more money to carry out its restructuring activities. Moody's cited Ford's problems in overseas markets like China and Europe and said its profit margins and cash flow were both below expectations. But it said Ford's outlook was stable and noted its cash on hand exceeds its debt. Ford finished the second quarter with more than $23 billion in cash and $37 billion in liquidity. Ford is in the middle of a $25 billion global restructuring. In a statement, it said it remains confident in its plan and progress. Quote, "Our underlying business is strong, our balance sheet is solid, and we have plenty of liquidity to invest in our compelling strategy for the future." So, Sven, didn't Ford just join up with Volkswagen on some kind of partnership recently?
They did indeed. It started early in the year when they made it official, I think at the Detroit Auto Show. They were going to partner together on the development of commercial vehicles using Ford's Transit Connect platform. It has since expanded to electric vehicles, with Ford gaining access to Volkswagen's MEB platform, another flexible electric vehicle platform. Now, Volkswagen is also going to invest in Argo AI. That's the company that develops self-driving vehicles that Ford has been an owner of. And Ford and VW are going to become equal and majority investors in that company. But Moody's said it didn't expect that partnership to yield any significant financial results for a few years yet. So they're color them not impressed, I guess.
This has just been going on and on for a while, that Wall Street has just not been impressed with Ford. And it's not enough that Ford has a war chest behind it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion over where the company's going and sort of how it plans to make money from some of these, mobility, self-driving cars and everything else that they're talking about. And Ford still haven't debuted a full battery electric car. That might help. I mean, they've got some in the works. We know that, but they have yet to really come out and show the public what they look like. And so we'll see if that might help. But yeah, they've been struggling to kind of climb above that $10 per share mark on the stock exchange.
I know there's another piece of auto news before we move on that you wanted to mention.
Yeah. So quickly, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, that's the non-government group that conducts crash tests. Well, they've given its coveted top safety pick plus to the Ram 1500 pickup truck. And why are we telling you about this? Well, it's the first time the organization has ever bestowed its top designation on a full-size pickup. So think like Ford F-150 you mentioned. Ram did it by improving its LED headlights with high beam assist on certain models that were built after May of this year.
Just wanted to say a word that Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by our friends at Lawrence Tech. Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track, and most classes are conveniently offered evenings at LTU's beautiful Southfield campus or that thing called the internet online.
So you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Find out more at ltu.edu. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Another local brewer has been bought by a national firm. This time, Brewbound reports that Rochester Mills has been grabbed up by California-based Lighthouse Strategies. How much it was sold for was not disclosed. Lighthouse produces both Cannabineers and Two Roots. They're cannabis-infused beers. With Rochester Mills' 46,000 square foot facility, reports say that it gives Two Roots a strong beachhead to expand the Two Roots brand into the Midwest, East Coast, and Canada. No cannabis-infused beers will be produced in Michigan, though. Two Roots will be made in bulk and then shipped to licensed cannabis manufacturers to infuse themselves. This is an interesting development, Sven. We're seeing more of these local breweries getting snapped up.
Yeah, this comes on the heels of the news about founders selling, I think, 90% of the stake to the big Spanish conglomerate whose name escapes me. But yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. This is coming right on the kind of heels of the cannabis. I mean, recreational marijuana is already legal here, but it's really going to, I think, the end of this year.
The engine is not started.
Exactly. From now until the end of this year, I think we're really going to start seeing businesses open, which was all sort of according to plan. I live in Ferndale. There are a whole bunch of dispensaries and other businesses that are getting set to open.
So up in Ferndale, I heard about the opening of that giant Gage cannabis company. It's a warehouse and retail shop. I mean, it's huge driving by it the other day.
Yeah. Interesting move here for Rochester Mills. I don't think, we've talked in previous episodes all about the challenging path that independent craft brewers face, especially around distribution. I don't see a lot of Rochester Mills in stores. I mean, I mentioned that I don't think I've ever had their beers, frankly, and they're a hometown brewery. So we'll see what this does for them. Interesting for them to tie up with this company known for, cannabis-infused beers, which, frankly, I barely knew was a thing. I'm not surprised to hear it, but I haven't tried any or certainly seen any here in Michigan, not surprisingly. The Knight Foundation is one of Detroit's more important foundations. It's put more than $100 million into Detroit projects since 2008 and $20 million into the arts last year. Today, the Miami-based nonprofit named Nathaniel Wallace as its new program director here in Detroit. Wallace has more than 2 decades of business and management experience. He's a longtime supporter of Detroit's arts and cultural scene, and especially of artists of color. Wallace is president of the Detroit Institute of Arts Founders Junior Council Board. He's also on the board of Artworks.
Fred McLeod, a household name to many sports fans from Detroit to Cleveland, died suddenly Monday evening at the age of 67. The Strongville, Ohio-born sportscaster was about to start his 14th consecutive season as play-by-play announcer for the Cleveland Cavaliers and his 15th overall. Detroiters know Fred best for his 22 seasons announcing Detroit Pistons games and for stints as a broadcast announcer for the Detroit Tigers and Lions. That TV-only announcer streak holds the record as the longest with the same NBA team. He also previously hosted sports news on WDIV Local 4, which is personally where I met him. Fred had 36 seasons in total of broadcasting games. He was a Point Park University graduate where he played baseball and pitched in the NAIA College World Series. He's won a number of awards, and at one point, Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert, well, he was his intern.
Wow.
Fred is survived by his wife Beth, mother Marilyn, sister Lynn, and his 3 children, Sean, Jenna, Molly, and their families. Quick note here, I only got to work with him for a very short time, but I was honored to do so, and he means so much to so many people of a certain generation in Detroit media. He's just been a giant. He was just doing Lions preseason games just a little while ago.
I definitely will miss his sportscast. He was talented. And one last thing, as we were getting ready to record this podcast, we got word that the historic Grand Hotel up on Mackinac Island has been sold to a private equity firm. The Musser family had owned and operated the nearly 400-room hotel since the 1930s. Grand Hotel was built in 1887. The buyer is KSL Capital Partners. They have $9 billion in equity commitments in the travel and leisure business. There aren't a whole lot of details known at this time, but Jer, I worked for 5 seasons on Mackinac Island, and this is huge news for that island. It's a small, tight-knit community up there. There are 4 or 5 families that own most of everything, including the Mussers. I mean, you have to understand the Grand Hotel is the hotel itself. Everybody knows that because you see it. You can see it from the Mackinac Bridge even. But they also own a lot of satellite restaurants and other businesses on the island. I think they have fudge stores.
The golf course.
This is a huge deal. How it affects things. I mean, you and I were talking about the Mackinac Policy Conference, and which the Grand Hotel hosts every year. A lot to shake out here, but I'm sure this is sending shockwaves across the island right now.
Well, and I wonder if this is a turning point for the island. It has gotten so popular lately with being in all the lists and all things like that. I mean, is it inevitable that big money comes and kind of like takes over?
I'm sure that it's been sniffing around and making offers, but like I said, there are 4 or 5 families up there that have held on for decades, and I'm sure they've probably, sort of pushed away a lot of offers in the past. So we'll see.
All right, that'll do it for your Daily Detroit. Be sure to tell a friend about the show, and let's push our region's conversation forward together. I'm Jarrett Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.